okay, where do you mount the transducers now that you've got all these electronics on your bass boat, right? You've got 360, you got this guy, you got all this stuff up here. Let's start in the back on your boat. I'm going to explain where I like to mount all of my different transducers so that I can get the best picture possible. Now this kind of holds true for each brand, but we're going to start out in the back, not on the front. We'll get to this in a few minutes, but all of this is going to be relative no matter what electronics brand you have on your boat. So let's slide on back there. Okay, first of all, on the back, you're going to have two different type of transducers. You're going to need to have what's called a through hull transducer, which I will show you in a minute. That is going to be able to read while you're running down the lake, because if not, you're not going to see anything when you're running down the lake. You have no clue how deep it is. But once you come off plane and you start idling, you're going to need to have some sort of structure scan type. This is the Lowrance 3-in-1 transducer. You need to have something like this, because what this is going to be able to do is it's going to read in 2D in whatever 2D scan, down scan, whatever they want to call it, whether it's Humminbird or Lowrance or Garmin. But then the real key here is that you want to make sure that when you mount the transducer, it's totally clear going this way and going this way. So you can achieve that a couple different ways. There's a couple different mounts. I've got two of the different mounts that I personally like on my boat here on this Bass Cat. But everyone with all the transducers, they come with a little bracket that will allow this transducer to be mounted against the transom and then sticking out. If at all possible, I do not like that type of mount. They bend. I've not had a lot of really good experience, because once it bends, you got to pull your boat out of the water to be able to push it down, more than likely. And a lot of times it will be reading funny because your transducer is going to be kicked back like this. You'll be reading back behind the boat. You won't have any idea what's going on. You won't. So that's where that should be mounted. I'm going to go under the boat. I'm going to show you next exactly those two mounts I'm talking about. Okay, here we are. We're up under my Bass Cat Era, and if you have a jack plate, this kind of mount is really good right here. This is the Transducer Saver that mounts right to, this is a TH Marine Atlas plate. It doesn't matter what kind of jack plate you have. If you can get one of these mounts that will fit whichever transducer, a 2D transducer you have. And the reason I say that is because it gets it up out of the way of the hull. So you know you're clear even of the step, the hull, everything. You're up a good ways from hitting in obstructions underwater. Plus, it's mounted firmly on this jack plate, so it's not gonna twist up. Now it doesn't give, so if you should bang a stump or something like that, you could damage the crystals in that 2D. This, like I said, this is the Humminbird. Could damage those crystals. It's a boat. Yeah, that could happen. That's subject to happen. And then, as you can see, if the motor is trimmed all the way down, it's going to be right in this area here. You're still going to have a full clearance all the way, both ways, so you're going to be able to get a good view. But on the Lowrance, I haven't seen the flush mount kit for a Humminbird transducer. I don't know if Garmin has one or not, but I know Lowrance has one, and that's what I've got right over here, because I've got both of them mounted. And I've got the Lowrance transducer right here under the step. It's flush mounted on the bottom of this step. You do not want to flush mount this transducer on the bottom of your boat. Do not do that. Not good. Do not do that. But you want to be able to get it on this step, because this is the running surface right here. The water's going to run through here. So again, no matter if your transducer's here or here, when you're running on plane, you're not going to see a thing out of this transducer. That's why you got to have the through hull. So right here is a good, I really like this surface because you get even further in front of the motor, and you've got that full clearance going both ways under the bottom of the boat. I mean, you can see really clearly. It's a really clean picture when it's mounted right here Ranger boats have this kind of little step as well. This is a Bass Cat again. I really like this step if you can flush mount them. If not, I like it right here. Those are the two places I like to mount those. And I mentioned earlier about the 2D when you're running, the through hull. The through hull is going to be mounted on the bottom side inside the hull, but it's going to be mounted, you see this drain plug right here? It's going to be mounted just behind this drain plug area. It's going to be mounted just behind this drain plug area. And we're going to look at that here in just a second. So these are the 2D. You want to make sure it's clear. That's how you mount those. Okay, so now we're getting to that through hull transducer. This one is super important to me. A lot of people overlook it if they're actually rigging their own boat, and it needs to be done properly. And in order to get a good through hull mount, you need to mount your transducer down there in that bottom area right in front of your drain plug, right in front of that drain plug area. I've actually got two of them. I've got the Humminbird one, which is that rounder one right there, and then just under this pump right here, there is a Lowrance one. The key to getting those mounted properly is that you've got to sand down and smooth off the fiberglass portion right there. Then you've got to clean that off really well, get that nice and clean, get all the little residue off of it. Then it comes with a 2-part epoxy. Each one of them comes with a 2-part epoxy. You put that epoxy down, then you put your transducer down right in that area. It's going to be a flat portion on the bottom. You're going to put that down, and then you want to put a brick or something heavy on top of that while that 2-part epoxy is setting, because you want to push out all the air bubbles. If you push out all the air bubbles between that flat surface and that transducer, you are going to get a crystal clear picture of what's under the water in a 2D while you're running down the lake. The Lowrance one, in my opinion, is a better through hull transducer. I really like the Lowrance for that. You can run 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, and you can read 100, 120 feet deep. That is crazy. So obviously you can see, 10, 20, 30 feet, and you can see, bait fish and all kind of stuff running down the lake, which is very important in my opinion, because I go to a lot of new lakes. I don't know what's going on. I can run through areas without having to come off a plane, and I can see whether there's bait fish in the area, standing timber, humps, things like that may not show up on a map. I can see that with the 2D sonar if my through hull transducer is mounted properly. So that is very important to have that guy mounted down there at the bottom and mounted properly. And sometimes over the course of the year or 2 years, that transducer will come loose. So all of a sudden, if your 2D sonar starts becoming really fuzzy or not reading well, it could be because your mount came a little bit loose, or you got an air bubble under there. You're not seeing everything you should be seeing. The only way to do it is to mount a whole nother transducer down there. You can't take it off and try to remount it. I've never seen that work. You just have to mount a new transducer and then run the cord and hook it back up, and then you'll be back in business. So that's through hull transducer, very, very important in my boat setup. So now, yay, now let's finally go up to the front and check all this craziness out. Okay, now for the business end, where you're fishing, you found your stuff with your transducers in the back. You want to mount your transducers up front properly. I've got an Ultrex up here this year. I had a Ghost last year. I loved the Ghost. They're both good units, and I would highly recommend getting one with a built-in transducer. I like that, but there is a drawback to whichever trolling motor you get. If it's got a built-in transducer and you have a problem, it's a trolling motor. You're going to be fishing around shallow rocks, possibly, whatever. If you smash that, damage the crystals in there, and it's not reading as well, it's a pain in the butt to redo that. So I know that going into it. If something happens to that built-in transducer, the 2D transducer in the bottom, I've got a problem. But with my setup, it's a little ridiculous because I've got the 360 and I've got the live scope here on this one. I'll show you a little bit on where to mount those in a second, but the 2D is still very important and I still want to have it, but I've got 2 backups. You might not have 2 backups. If you don't have 2 backups, if you don't have a 360 or a live scope or a live view or an active target, if you don't have one of those views, you're probably going to want to mount that transducer on the outside of your trolling motor. That way it's a lot easier to replace. I would say if you're a shallow water fisherman, you're going to go through probably one transducer a year. That's just you know, what happens. So I've gone 2 years, 3 years without replacing one, but then I've replaced one a couple times in the same year, just because I happen to fish some shallow water stuff and bang around. But if the front of your boat is not ridiculous like this, I'm going to show you exactly how these are mounted. We're going to get down and show you that a little bit closer. Okay, so here we are on the front. Again, this is the built-in 2D sonar on the front of the Ultrex. The Ultrex is kind of cool because it has a universal plug that this transducer comes back to, so you can get an adapter and put it in either the Lowrance or the Humminbird. And I think there's an adapter for the Garmin. Don't hold me to that, but really you don't need the 2D adapter for that. I've got it running to my Lowrance unit because I'm going to be using my Humminbird for the 360. I want the 2D on my Lowrance, and then the live scope is going to be on my Garmin. But again, if you're not going to have one of these two, I would highly suggest putting, even if you have a built-in, go ahead and put a 2D transducer on here. I feel like that 2D add-on transducer, if it matches the brand that it comes with, it's probably going to be maybe a tick clearer. And you can also put a down image type transducer from Lowrance and put it right on there. They're longer and skinnier. That can be good if you really want to do that. But with the technology these days, I think you're silly not to get, you know, a live view or a 360 or even both. But there's been a lot of debate, and from the research I've done online, in my preliminary testing, you want to have your 360 about 4.5 inches above this collar right here on the Ultrex. Now, you know, and that just goes because of the distance it is. I think each one is going to be different, but it kind of gives you a gauge, a place to start. About 4.5 inches from right here to the bottom of there. That's going to be about 4 to 4.5 inches to right here. Right here on your live scope, I've got it on the forward-facing view, and you can see that that is just barely below the 360. From the testing I've done so far, that seems to be the right mixture. You don't want to have your 360 below your live. I don't like that. And you don't want to have your live view too far below your 360 because you're going to obstruct the view that you're going to get. There's nothing you can do about the trolling motor and the 360 coming into contact, but with this thing spinning all the way around, you'd be surprised there's not a lot of black. I thought there was going to be a big blob, like a big dark spot, and there's not. It does a really good job of scanning all the way around it and putting the picture together for you. But that is where I mount my transducers for the live scope and for the 360. And then again, I've got the 2D built in for now. If something happens to this one, I'm just gonna tack on a 2D transducer and run it up the deal and then put it into my Lowrance unit. So hopefully that can help you get started on where to mount your transducers or transducers on your boat with the 360 live scope, the 2D, the through hull, and the structure scan type in the back, side image, whatever you want to call it. Hopefully this gives you a little room to go ahead and get started mounting that transducer on the boat and getting a good view.